February 14th, 1943. Beneath the jagged Atlas Mountains, the American experiment in Europe is bleeding out as veteran panzers shatter green lines and thousands flee in a panicked rout. Yet, amidst the ruins, a ghost of ancient cavalry begins to stir. A man who believes a necktie is as lethal as a tank, and that discipline is the only cure for cowardice. Could Lieutenant General George S. Patton resurrect this broken force before the nightmare becomes permanent, or would his legend die in the Tunisian sand? The disaster began not with a lack of courage, but with a void in leadership. General Dwight D. Eisenhower stares at the map in his Algiers headquarters, his jaw tightened in a mask of suppressed rage as he listens to the reports of burning Shermans and abandoned supply depots. He wonders if his choice for command, Major General Lloyd Fredendall, was a fatal error. Fredendall, the man holding the fate of the Second Corps, is nowhere near the smoke. He sits 70 miles behind the front lines, encased in a subterranean fortress known as Speedy Valley. You might ask yourself, how can a general lead a war he refuses to see? Fredendall had diverted an entire company of engineers for 3 weeks to blast tunnels into a solid rock hillside, while his men lacked basic foxholes. Internal friction poisons the Allied command as Fredendall openly mocks his British and French counterparts. He views the British First Army not as partners but as rivals to be ignored. He issues orders in a bizarre, self-made slang that leaves his colonels baffled during the heat of the Panzer charge. "Move the walking boys and the pop guns to place D," he barks over the radio. His subordinates waste precious hours deciphering that walking boys means infantry and pop guns means the very artillery they need to survive. This isn't just a lack of communication, it is a clinical breakdown of command and control that the German High Command, led by Rommel and von Arnim, is eager to exploit. The Axis forces watch through binoculars as American units are scattered in penny packets, small, isolated groups of tanks and men positioned too far apart to support one another. On February 14th, von Arnim launches Operation Frühlingswind. 140 German tanks surge through the Fade Pass, catching the 1st Armored Division in a parade ground formation. The German 88mm guns, those legendary dual-purpose monsters, wait in concealment. They open fire at ranges where the American guns can't even reach, turning the Tunisian desert into a graveyard of smoldering steel. Witness the chaos of the retreat. The 168th Infantry Regiment finds itself surrounded on the high ground of Jebel Lesouda, watching helplessly as their armor is annihilated in the valley below. Out of 2,000 men, only 300 will evade capture under the cover of darkness. The rest are marched toward German prisoner-of-war camps, a visual testament to Fredendall's tactical bankruptcy. Major General Ernest Harman, sent by Eisenhower to assess the carnage, returns with a scathing verdict. Fredendall is a physical and moral coward. The survival of the American army now rests on a single desperate decision. Eisenhower summons a man he knows is both a genius and a liability. On March 4, 1943, a dust-caked messenger flags down Major General George S. Patton, Jr. in Morocco. Patton, ever the romantic of war, writes in his diary, "Well, it is taking over rather a mess, but I will make a go of it." He arrives at 2nd Corps headquarters at 10 a.m. on March 6th to find Fredendall still at the breakfast table, a lingering symbol of the lethargy that had cost 6,000 casualties. Patton doesn't offer a handshake, he offers a revolution of iron will. Patton's first act of command is a psychological thunderclap. He orders the mess hall closed at 7:30 a.m. sharp. He tours the camps and finds a slovenly mob of soldiers who no longer salute and wear a mix of civilian and military rags. To the average observer, Patton's response seems insane. He mandates that every officer wear a necktie at all times, even in the mud of the front lines. He demands that helmets be strapped tight, even when a soldier is using the latrine. He imposes a $25 fine for violations, half a month's pay for a private, to ensure the standard is absolute. The soldiers are mad as hell, but Patton knows exactly what he is doing. He understands a fundamental truth of human psychology. You cannot be disciplined in great things if you are undisciplined in the small things. As Omar Bradley, Patton's new deputy, watches the men knotting their ties, he realizes the tough new era has begun. Each tie is a reminder that the era of the bunker is over. Patton isn't hiding, he is everywhere, standing in his M3A1 scout car with his ivory-handled revolvers, radiating a confidence that acts as a tonic for a poisoned army. We must dismantle the great myth of Kasserine Pass. Many historians claim the defeat was solely due to green troops and inferior equipment. This is a lie designed to protect the reputations of the high command. Archival evidence from German after-action reports reveals that Rommel was actually impressed by the flexibility of the American equipment and the tenacity of the individual soldiers. The failure was 100% a failure of the operational art. The Americans had the tools, they simply had a leader who didn't know how to use them. Patton begins the structural reorganization of the Second Corps. He halts the penny packet distribution and begins massing his 88,000 men into concentrated lethal formations. He integrates the Air Support Command directly into the ground mission, ending the bureaucratic wall between the sky and the dirt. He hones the fire direction centers of the artillery, creating a system where multiple batteries can rain hell on a single coordinate within seconds. He tells his staff, "Gentlemen, tomorrow we attack. If we are not victorious, let no one come back alive." The strategic pillars of Patton's plan are simple: vitesse, 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 speed and violence. He assesses his divisions with a cold eye. He loves Terry Allen's 1st Infantry, the Big Red One, for their aggression. He mocks Orlando Ward's 1st Armored as timid. He worries that his superiors, like the British General Harold Alexander, have him on too tight a leash. Alexander only wants a minor victory to protect the flank of Montgomery's 8th Army. Patton, however, is dreaming of the coast. He wants to cut the throat of the Afrika Corps. Discussions between Patton and his deputy Omar Bradley reveal the internal friction. Bradley is the soldier's general, quiet and methodical. Patton is the flamboyant gambler. Patton knows Eisenhower sent Bradley to be his eyes and ears, essentially a spy for the high command. Instead of resenting it, Patton pulls Bradley close, making him his deputy. He wants Bradley to see the transformation firsthand. He wants the world to know that the American soldier is not a coward. He just needs a reason to believe in himself. The training reaches a fever pitch. Patton introduces bear pits for hand-to-hand combat and forces men to double time in steel pots with unsheathed bayonets. "A pint of sweat saves a gallon of blood," he screams at the recruits. He is building more than a corps. He is building a cult of the offensive. He urinated into Terry Allen's slit trench to prove a point. "Digging in is for losers. An army is defeated when it digs in," he declares. He demands that his men become moving targets, firing on the march to shatter the enemy's nerves. On March 17th, Patton launches the offensive to retake Gafsa. The rain turns the desert into a sea of mud, but the spirit of the Second Corps is unrecognizable. They take the city without a fight as the Italians flee. Patton climbs a massive rock outside the town, surveying the landscape with an uneasy eye, desperate to find the Germans. He tells his aide, Dick Jensen, "Go down that track until you get blown up, then come back and report." This is the raw, unfiltered Patton, a man who views his own life and the lives of his men as fuel for the furnace of victory. By March 18th, Colonel William Darby's Rangers seize the oasis of El Guettar. They move like ghosts through the rocky ridges, surprising the Italian defenders and securing the gateway to the coast. The stage is set for the ultimate confrontation. The German 10th Panzer Division, the very unit that had slaughtered the Americans at Sidi Bou Zid, is being moved from the reserve. They are coming to crush the American upstarts once and for all. The night of March 22, 1943, is bitterly cold in the Tunisian desert. Along the ridges overlooking the road to Gabs, the men of the 1st Infantry Division are doing something Patton rarely permits. They are digging in, but they aren't hiding. They are creating a killing zone. Patton's reorganization has put the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion and massed 155 mm howitzers in positions that crossfire the valley. They wait in the silence, listening for the rhythmic clanking of German tracks. At 6 a.m., 50 Panzers of the 10th Panzer Division emerge from the mountain pass. They move in a terrifying, three-sided screen, followed by motorized infantry in half-tracks. The German commanders are confident. They remember Kasserine. They expect the Americans to break the moment the first shell hits. They have no idea that the Green Boys they fought in February have been replaced by a professional corps that has spent the last 10 days with knots in their ties and fire in their hearts. The Panzers surge forward, their long-barreled guns searching for targets. Suddenly, the lead tank erupts in a plume of orange flame. It has struck a minefield concealed in a wadi. The column slows, and that is the moment the American artillery opens the gates of hell. Using the new fire direction centers Patton championed, the 155mm howitzers rain a methodical air-burst bombardment on the German half-tracks. Shrapnel shreds the Panzer Grenadiers before they can even dismount. This is not the fragmented response of Kasserine. This is a synchronized symphony of destruction. In the valley, the M3 half-tracks of the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion engage the Panzers at point-blank range. These thin-skinned vehicles are outclassed, but they refuse to yield. They trade blow for blow with the German armor. By 9 a.m., 30 German tanks lie shattered and burning in the El Guettar Valley. The 10th Panzer, a veteran unit of the Eastern Front, is forced to do something it has rarely done. It retreats in the face of American steel. Patton receives the news and radiates confidence. Yet a personal rivalry is brewing behind the lines. Patton is increasingly frustrated with Major General Orlando Ward of the 1st Armored Division. He views Ward as timid and overly defensive. On March 24th, when an attack on Hill 322 stalls, Patton's temper explodes. He orders Ward to lead the next morning's attack personally. Imagine the tension, a 2-star general forced to lead a battalion charge like a lowly lieutenant just to satisfy Patton's lust for aggression. Consider the alternate reality. What if Eisenhower had chosen a more cautious general than Patton? If the Second Corps had remained in its Kasserine-era slump, the Axis would have likely destroyed the American presence in Tunisia entirely. The invasion of Sicily would have been delayed by a year, and the Soviet Union might have reached Berlin before a single American soldier stepped onto the beaches of Normandy. Patton's necktie discipline saved more than just a corps. It saved the Western Alliance's timeline. The second German attack at El Guettar begins at 4:45 p.m. This time, the Panzers stay back, sending their infantry forward on foot. But the American observers on the high ground are patient. They wait until the Germans are within 1,500 yards. The Big Red One doesn't flinch. The infantry and Rangers hold their ground, pouring small arms fire into the German ranks while the artillery continues its relentless pounding. After 2 hours of futile slaughter, the Germans give up. The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht has been shattered in the Tunisian sand. Despite the victory, a moment of intellectual shock awaits Patton. Throughout the battle, he believes he is outmaneuvering the legendary Desert Fox, Erwin Rommel. He famously shouts, "Rommel, you magnificent bastard, I read your book." But history reveals a different truth. Rommel had actually been flown back to Germany on March 9th due to poor health. Patton was fighting a phantom Rommel, the ghosts of the Afrika Korps' training, not the man himself. This revelation doesn't diminish the victory, but it highlights the psychological weight Rommel's name carried over the American command. Arguments between Patton and the British General Harold Alexander intensify. Alexander, still wary of American competence, keeps Patton on a tight leash, refusing to let him drive to the coast. Patton seethes, writing that he is doing the work of a corporal while being ordered about by the British. He views Alexander's caution as a lack of operational art. This friction would set the stage for the famous race across Sicily just months later. Patton wasn't just fighting Germans, he was fighting for the respect of his own allies. Technical precision was the true hero of El Guettar. The 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion paid a heavy price, losing 21 of its 31 vehicles, but they were credited with 37 kills. The M10 tank destroyer made its debut, proving that American industrial might could produce a platform capable of hunting the Panzer III and IV. The logistical data is staggering. In the 8 days of the offensive, Patton's corps moved over 57,000 gallons of gasoline and 45 tons of ammunition through mountain passes that the Germans thought were impassable. Patton's leadership was not without its shadows. The relief of Orlando Ward remains a controversial chapter. Ward was a competent commander who had been dealt a bad hand by Fredendall, yet Patton sacrificed him to appease the British and to set an example of unrelenting offense. This established a culture of relief in the U.S. Army. If you don't win fast, you're out. It created aggressive leaders, but it also led to unnecessary casualties as commanders pushed their men to avoid the Patton axe. By April 10th, the mission of the Second Corps is complete. They have drawn off the German reserves, allowing Montgomery's 8th Army to break the Mareth line. Eisenhower visits Patton and is stunned by the transformation. The slovenly mob is gone. In their place stands a professional, mechanized force that looks the enemy in the eye. Patton has turned the Italians of the Allied Army, as the British derisively called them, into the vanguard of the Western world. As the campaign winds down, Patton is sent back to Morocco to plan for the invasion of Sicily. He leaves Omar Bradley in command, knowing his job is done. He has provided the shock therapy required to professionalize the U.S. Army. The lessons of Tunisia, massed artillery, integrated air support, and the psychological necessity of the offensive would become the DNA of the American military for the rest of the century. The existential question we started with, how can a broken army be saved, has its answer. It wasn't just the neckties, it was the restoration of the will to fight. Patton proved that in war, the spirit of the men is the ultimate weapon. He transformed a group of frightened civilians into a force of nature. As the sun sets over the Tunisian ridges, the burning hulls of the 10th Panzer Division serve as a warning to the Third Reich. The Americans have learned how to kill. The forge of victory is never cold. From the humiliations of Kasserine to the triumphs of El Guettar, the U.S. Army discovered its soul in the desert. They learned that defeat is not the end, but a teacher. And George S. Patton, with his ivory pistols and his uncompromising discipline, became the teacher they never wanted but desperately needed. The Patton legend was born in the blood and dust of 1943, and the world would never be the same. Patton believed that discipline in small things like neckties led to discipline in great things like tank battles. Do you think modern leaders should focus on these small details, or is it just chicken shit drilling? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.